Welcome back to another GameCast review. I am Snowy, otherwise known as Count Fracula, bringing you a review of Pokémon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee for the Switch. Before I start this review though, I will tell you that I'm approaching this game as a long-time fan of this series, having personally played every main series game and most of the side games to at least story end, and as someone who completed the Pokédex from Generation 4, so I could hardly be described as either a casual fan or coming from a purely objective standpoint. With that disclaimer out of the way though, let's crack on. Let's Go is a retelling of the story told in Pokémon Yellow and claimed by Game Freak to be the definitive canon version of that story. You play as a young trainer starting out your adventure in the Kanto region. As you go to pick your starting Pokemon, you run into a wild Pikachu or Eevee, depending on the version that, when captured, won't stay in its ball. This Pokemon then becomes your partner and travels the world with you, spending most of the time on your shoulder. The rest of the story should be very familiar to anyone who has played a Pokemon game, going throughout the region, collecting gym badges and battling the evil team du jour, Team Rocket, before facing off against the Pokemon League to become the champion. Most of the story remains the same as in Pokemon Yellow, but with a couple of changes. First and foremost, and be the most obvious to veteran fans, is making the rival character and Blue, Professor Oak's grandson, two different people. Your rival is now a boy with the default name of Trace, although that can be changed at the start of the game, who is a resident of Pallet Town and not a relative of the Professor. This time he's a more affable character who starts out confident but actually looks up to the player, driving him to get stronger and eventually defeat them, and eventually coming into their own as a character. While you might deride this change, I feel it gives a more satisfying arc to the character than the original arc in Yellow, as you aren't actively rooting against them for the entire game. Blue's role in this game is much more passive though, making Team Rocket seem more genuinely threatening in the Sliff takeover, using just dialogue and clearing up a few loose ends a bit neater than originally after the main plot winds up. Overall, the story element of Let's Go is markedly shorter than recent Pokemon games, mostly due to the limitations of the game it was based off of, but there's enough additions to make it feel fresh, and the narrative overall felt a lot tighter and more well contained than some of the 3DS game's plots. Pokémon Let's Go is primarily known for being one of the biggest changes in the mechanics of a traditional Pokémon game ever. The random encounter battle systems of old have been removed entirely in this game and replaced with the catching system used in Pokémon Go. There is an exception in a couple of cases with legendary Pokémon and a couple of fixed place Pokémon where you have a time limit of a 5-minute battle, after which you have an opportunity to catch the Pokemon through the Pokemon Go catching method. When the game was first announced, I was completely turned off by this change, but having played it, for the most part I believe it was implemented really well. I don't like that almost any Pokemon can now run from an encounter after a while, even if it is a bit of a realistic reaction. But I do like the way that Pokemon now appear in the overworld and run around. It makes the world seem much more alive than in any previous title, and the controls once in an encounter are quite responsive and fun to use. On that note though, I do have a couple of little gripes regarding controls in encounters. Playing in the handheld mode is fine. You can use the motion controls, which I did for the most of the game, or disable them and use the right analog stick to move the camera. Both of those work really well. The problems arise when you plug your Switch into a TV and try to use the Pokeball Plus accessory that was sold with the game for an extra premium. The game normally makes use of 4 face buttons on the Switch, but the Pokeball only has room for 2, clicking the analog stick in for A and a pad at the top of the ball for B. Unfortunately, that means if you didn't think to remove the controllers from the side of the Switch like I did, then you can't easily access the options menu or use several menu-based shortcuts. This, combined with the analog stick constantly reorientating itself thanks to inbuilt accelerometers, making menu navigation a chore unless you hold it rigidly still, is making the use of the accessory a bit of a chore, and not something I would recommend buying as anything other than a fancy little desk toy. I saw a lot of people worry about the balancing of the game if wild battles were being removed, but I can report the game is pretty well balanced overall, with only the mid-game gyms showing a small spike in otherwise competent difficulty curve. This is done thanks to your entire party getting XP together after each battle and catching each Pokémon. The only exception to that is the active Pokémon in a battle gains a slightly more XP than the rest of the party. My playstyle kept me just above the level of each area of the game as I progressed, and gave me an experience that was moderately challenging at certain points, and certainly much more challenging than the 3DS titles. A lot of the experience has been streamlined in Let's Go. The move list has received a significant trim, and while I've seen a lot of fans kick up a rather pathetic amount of fuss over this, I can certainly appreciate the need to trim away a lot of the moves whose effects are replicated many times over and sometimes better by other moves. Also removed are the Z moves from Pokemon Sun and Moon, which were very much a gimmick that I won't particularly miss. Bizarrely though, Mega Evolution from Pokemon X and Y has been retained. I thought that it had been given the boot too until I beat the last gym and was given the stones for the starters. However, since hold items are another feature that has been left on the wayside along with abilities, the stones don't need to be given to each Pokemon to work, you just have to have the Pokemon in your party. If I were to change anything about the gameplay though, it would be for encounters to present you with a choice. Try and capture the Pokemon straight away with default capture rates, or battle it to lower its HP, then try and capture it with altered catch rates. This would satisfy fans who didn't appreciate the formula being changed as much as it had been, and present an interesting challenge to weigh up. You can either risk using a lot of balls to just catch the one Pokemon without battling it, or you can battle it and risk making it run away when its HP runs out. With a core game coming out next year though, we may see something like that implemented if they take away any lessons from this game. Pokemon Let's Go marks the first time a Pokemon RPG has been rendered in HD, and no, I'm not counting Pokken Tournament, as that is a fighting game with a paper-thin plot spread over it. Overall, it looks stunning, showing us the original 151 Pokemon plus a few extras and additional forms, and what is to some the definitive region in the best detail we have ever seen. Every Pokemon can be walked in the overworld and are all scaled correctly for the first time since the GameCube spin-off games. A feature retained from the 3DS titles is the in-battle animations for each Pokemon whilst attacking, each of them being given a few stock animations for different types of move, and the occasional signature move getting its own special animation, particularly for Pokemon like Pikachu and Eevee, the mascot Pokemon, as they have certain extra special moves attached to them. Some of the attacks have kept the same animations and sounds from the 3DS games, while others have changed, with Psychic notably having the sound for it in the first two generations in the mix whilst the attack is animating. The music from the originals has been lovingly recreated with very faithful instrumentals and feels very true to the spirit of the original game. Pokemon cries have for the most part not changed since the Gen 6 update, but Pikachu and Eevee have been given more sounds to their repertoire, thanks to them being the central Pokemon of the games. Eevee now also has a distinct cry performed by a voice actor, just like Pikachu. Performance was solid almost throughout the game, but I did notice a few frame drops while a few of the more visually intensive attacks were happening, or when transitioning from a route to a town occasionally. And there is still a notable pause in double battles after selecting an action for both for the turn and the turn actually happening. That's an issue that we've had since X and Y came out a few years ago, and it's still not been fixed, bizarrely. While some old school fans are quick to anger at this game for being a stripped down game compared to its contemporaries, it represents for me the biggest leap forward in the formula for a decade, and perhaps as a result the freshest experience I've had with a Pokemon game in years. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee gets a must buy from me. Whether you're a seasoned fan looking for more of the thing that you love, or someone just getting into the franchise, the game is definitely worth checking out. Thank you for watching this review then. I have been Snowy, and stay tuned to GameCast for news, reviews, let's plays, podcasts on all things gaming, and I will see you soon for something else.